The book of CNN's worst Bernie Sanders smears has many chapters. There was Jake Tapper's fact check in need of a fact check, in which he claimed that Bernie Sanders and AOC lied about a study by distorting their otherwise accurate statements.
Is that true? Did a study funded by the Koch brothers indicate that Medicare for all would actually save the US government trillions of dollars? No, it's not true, at least not according to the author of the study.
There was Chris Cillizza's epic video in which he unleashed the hackiest, overwrought arguments against Bernie Sanders.
Now, does this younger, more diverse Democratic Party want to nominate a 77-year-old white man as its standard bearer?
That was a video I covered in detail in my CNN Smears Bernie video. Now, CNN may have smeared plenty of people outside of Bernie.
Representative Omar, Democrat from Minnesota. She said things about Jews buying friends and influence on Israeli issues.
And Bernie's been smeared by just about every mainstream media outlet.
Socialists disguise their thirst for power as the greater good, which means pretending to care while taking control. So it's not about helping those in jail, just expanding the jail to include you and me.
But a CNN Bernie smear has, to me, become an iconic feature of trashy cable news reporting. And not long ago, I stumbled upon what I think very well may be the worst one yet. So I'll be breaking down that segment in this video. I'm pretty confident this is the worst CNN Bernie hit piece yet, but I want to know your thoughts, so let me know in the comments. Have you seen a worse CNN hatchet job than this? Or have I really found the bottom here? Is this as bad as it gets?
Breaking news, 2020 presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has released his tax returns. I got very excited. I started getting ahead of myself.
She's so excited. Can't wait to smear.
Bernie Sanders is a millionaire. Over the past 3 years, Sanders made nearly $3 million, which makes him, of course, one of the wealthy people that he himself targets on the campaign trail.
So Bernie Sanders is a millionaire, and there certainly would be something to attack there if he suddenly stopped asking the rich to pay their fair share of taxes. Like if now that he's a millionaire, he suddenly started saying things like,
I just read Atlas Shrugged, and as it turns out, millionaires and billionaires are job creators. So I think it's about time that we said to the poor of this country, enough is enough. We're not paying for your welfare anymore.
That would be a scandal. Unfortunately for CNN, by the way, fantastic Bernie impression on my part. Unfortunately for CNN, he did not change his tune. So there's no hypocrisy to point out. He's remained principled. So instead, they're going with the narrative that he's been targeting the rich on the campaign trail. So she's about to roll some pretty nasty footage, I'm sure, of him talking about how evil rich people are. So let's check it out.
We are going to ask the millionaires and billionaires of this country to start paying their fair share of taxes.
Billionaires and millionaires have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process supporting Republican candidates, and today is payback time for them.
Look at her face. He just said rich people need to pay their fair share, which is principled, considering he's one of those millionaires. The guy is fighting to raise his own taxes. And then in the other clip, he said that millionaires and billionaires have been pouring money into political campaigns. Does anyone believe that that isn't true? Here's a list of some of the top donors from the 2016 election. Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, they donated $123 million. Michael Bloomberg, $95 million. Tom and Catherine Steyer, $73 million. Richard Deweyline, $40 million. Donald Sussman, $27 million. That's a lot of money. Open Secrets lists 100 donors from 2016 who contributed over $1 million. 12 of them donated over $10 million.
Okay, Sanders tonight, though, insists he is not out to make enemies out of the rich.
It's not vilifying to say that people have a whole lot of money, in some cases billions of dollars of wealth. They should pay their fair share of taxes.
Again with the face. She doesn't believe him. Asking rich people to pay more in taxes is necessarily vilifying them. There's a lot of very rich people who agree with him. Take Warren Buffett, who, when he was the third richest person in the world, wrote an editorial in the New York Times explaining that he paid a lower percentage of his income in taxes than did anyone else who worked in his office. In that piece, Stop Coddling the Super Rich, he argued that the super rich need to start paying their fair share. and he had very specific proposals. But for those making more than $1 million, there were 236,883 such households in 2009. I would raise rates immediately on taxable income in excess of $1 million, including, of course, dividends and capital gains. And for those who make $10 million or more, there were 8,274 in 2009. I would suggest an additional increase in rate. That was Warren Buffett making the case for taxing the rich in 2011. It would be hard to smear Buffett as a pinko commie, since he is literally a professional capitalist. But the media didn't have to take him all too seriously, since he was just a rich guy spouting off. He had the credibility to make the argument, but no political power to actually make the changes he was proposing. Bernie Sanders, back a few years ago when he was the poorest person in the Senate, had some political power, but was easily dismissed as a far-left loony who never earned any real money in his life. He didn't know what it takes for rich people to make $1 million in the beautiful free market, so he had no credibility. Now that he's written a bestseller and indeed become a millionaire from that free market, he has the credibility and the potential power to make those changes. So now the wealthy CNN anchor feels deeply offended because the chances that she'll personally have to pay her fair share is now at stake. By the way, Erin Burnett's net worth, according to Celebrity Net Worth, which big grain of salt here, is $16 million. At any rate, she's worth a lot of money.
Okay, Rob Astorino is with me, member of President Trump's 2020 Re-elect Advisory Council, and Jess McIntosh, former director of communications outreach for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Okay, Jess, So
just to be clear, that's a Trump affiliate and a Clinton affiliate. Seems like a very balanced panel. I'm sure they'll give Bernie a fair shake.
Look, as I have been saying, Sanders is so lucky to live in a capitalist society because he wrote a book about being a socialist.
Democratic socialist, by which he actually means social democrat, but okay, go on.
And people bought it, and so he got to make all this money, and he's now made, a few $1 million over the past few years because of his book. What do you make of the numbers? Obviously, the past year, his numbers fell. He's $500,000, but all in, he's making a lot of money.
I actually don't see too much of a contradiction between being a millionaire and railing against a class that produces millionaires.
Oh, thank God. The Clintonite actually says something fair.
Where I'm totally dumbfounded is that he has had 2 years to come up with the "so now I'm a millionaire" message, and his message is capitalist. He's literally saying, I made a product that the market wanted and I got rich off of it, and all of you can do that too.
Two problems here. First, Bernie does not want to get rid of the private market. He's never argued to totally abolish capitalism. He's not Karl Marx, he's not Vladimir Lenin, he's not even John Lennon. He's just said, as per those clips that Erin Burnett just showed, that rich people should pay their fair share.
Democratic socialism, to me, is creating a government and an economy and a society which works for all rather than just the top 1%. It means ending the absurd inequalities that exist today.
Second, his message is clearly not that you can do it too. Look at this clip from the Fox News town hall that he did where they offered the same attack, but were decent enough to give him a chance to respond to it.
When you wrote the book and you made the money,
Yeah.
Isn't that the definition of capitalism, the American dream?
No. I mean, what we want is a country where everybody has opportunity. I have a college degree. Like, I'm a United States Senator. But a lot of people don't have a college degree. A lot of people are not United States Senators. I want everybody in this country to be able to have health care, to have education. So what we are fighting for, Brett, is a society not where just a few people can make a whole lot of money, but a society where everybody in this country has the opportunity to live in security and dignity.
That's not his message. I would have suggested that maybe this is a moment to talk about how the system is rigged for people like him, white, male, privileged, with a platform, and that he would want to work to make sure that the system works for everybody. But
a lot of people don't have a college degree. A lot of people are not United States Senators.
Instead, he just did his really defensive, it's not a crime to write a book, and I don't know where that's coming from or how that serves him.
Maybe it's coming from the fact that people like you are acting like it is a crime to write a successful book. That's the whole point of this segment.
Well, okay, so Rob, he was just asked why he did not pay, because this whole thing about fair share.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he was asked about, now he's a millionaire and his fair share, and let me play the exchange.
Your marginal tax rate was 26% because of President Trump's tax cuts. So why not say, I'm leading this revolution, I'm not going to take those?
Come on, we're doing...
That's the audience that Fox pulled together, and even they're laughing at this question. The idea that everyone on the left should pay more in taxes is ridiculous. That's not how it works. You pay what you have to pay, you get what you're entitled to take. Are we going to start saying that Republicans shouldn't be allowed to get Medicare or Medicaid benefits or Social Security or food stamps? How about the fact that the federal government redistributes money from blue states to red states? Red states don't like handouts or redistribution, right? So I guess we should just stop doing that as well. It's ridiculous. You don't get a special individual relationship with the government based on your political philosophy. Everyone fights for what they believe in, and then we all come together with an understanding that there's equality before the law. Let's see how Bernie responds.
I pay the taxes that I owe. And by the way, why don't you get Donald Trump up here and ask him how much he pays in taxes?
Okay, the other guy's doing it, so I'm doing it too, is not a good answer. Okay, I think we all can agree that was not a good answer.
Well, I like my answer better, but I've had the chance to think about it, and it is a shockingly stupid question.
But he should have been ready for that. And by the way, I don't know how a millionaire is paying 26%. He's got a good accountant. What do you make of this response?
Well, first of all, I was shocked that he actually combed his hair, which was great. That's a great start for a millionaire.
Unnecessary.
No, look.
What a dick. This guy is talking about hair, and he's a fan of Donald Trump.
Here's what he needs to do, and what they need to do at the University of Vermont. They need to teach us a course, and Bernie can be Professor Bernie again and talk about the virtues of the free market versus socialism, which he espouses, which has collapsed everywhere. Socialism destroys wealth. It destroys freedoms. Here he made, as Jess said, and it was a perfect example.
It's amazing these people still haven't learned the difference between Bernie's democratic socialism and the so-called socialism of places like the USSR or China. I get that socialism is a tricky word. The movement began with the so-called utopian socialists. Marxist-Leninists call themselves socialists, as do many of their philosophical opponents on the left. Even the Oxford English Dictionary accepts the misleading proposition advanced by both the USSR and the United States during the Cold War that the USSR is what is meant by socialism, that is to say command economy. Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, China, and Venezuela all consider themselves socialists with varying levels of credibility to the claim, given the movement's earliest ambitions were to free and empower workers. But forget all that. Bernie has always been very clear that, regardless of labels, what he supports is moving towards an economic system similar to Scandinavian countries.
Is it really possible for someone who calls himself a socialist to be elected president of the United States?
Well, so long as we know what democratic socialism is. And if we know that in countries in Scandinavia, like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, in those countries, healthcare is a right of all people. In those countries, college education, graduate school is free. And in those countries, by and large, government works for ordinary people in the middle class rather than for the billionaire class.
I can hear the Republican attack ad right now. He wants America to look more like Scandinavia.
That's right. That's right. And what's wrong with that?
Those countries have not collapsed. They have some of the best healthcare and education systems in the world, and high purchasing power per capita.
He worked hard. I don't envy Bernie Sanders. I'm proud. I'm happy for him that he made $2 million on a book sale.
Really? Because earlier you took a cheap shot at his hair.
But here's what I would suggest with that $2 million. Here's what he should do. Because in Vermont, they pay the highest monthly premiums for health insurance. He wants to give away free health insurance. He could buy the free health insurance for 350 people in Vermont with that $2 million.
So if you advocate for universal healthcare, rather than trying to actually implement your healthcare system, you should just buy it for people out of what money you're able to personally earn, instead of fixing the system and moving to one that would work better. After writing the definitive Medicare for All bill in the Senate and running for president so that we actually have a chance of passing it, Bernie hasn't done enough. He needs to personally buy people healthcare out of his own pocket, slapping a tiny Band-Aid on the system that he's been railing against for all these years.
So that's the thing, because he scoffs, I pay the taxes I owe. By the way, that's the rule. Mm-hmm. The problem is when you're Bernie Sanders and you rail against people paying their fair share and you don't have the huge charitable donations and you're not donating money to the IRS, you are a hypocrite.
Okay, now I feel like they don't even know what hypocrite means. A hypocrite is someone who advocates for rules that they don't follow. Bernie isn't asking individual rich people to unilaterally give money to pay for other people's healthcare. Bernie is advocating for changing the tax system, changing the healthcare system, and is working hard to do just that. A hypocrite would be, say, a person who tells an individual rich person to donate money to the IRS, but doesn't do that themselves. I wonder if Aaron Burnett donates to the IRS.
So can I just play who he's starting to sound a lot like, right? I pay what I owe. By the way.
Any guesses? Any guesses? That's right.
Donald Trump says that and is completely unashamed. I pay what I owe, and why would I pay $1 more? Okay.
That's right. Every American should do that.
Except Bernie, of course.
Here are Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump talking about their books.
I don't apologize for writing a book that was number 3 on the New York Times bestseller, translated into 5 or 6 languages, and that's that.
I wrote The Art of the Deal, which is, in all fairness, I think the #1 selling business book of all time.
Sorry, I mean, it is funny.
Great.
It is funny.
Yeah, they both wrote a successful book or had a book released in their names. The only thing funny here is that, of course, The Art of the Deal is not the best-selling business book of all time. Generous figures estimate that it sold about 1 million copies, while titles like How to Win Friends and Influence People and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People each selling at least 10 times that amount. But I don't know why I'm pointing it out. Surely CNN will do that for me.
Well, look.
Why are these guys so alike?
Yeah, they're on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but so alike, so alike.
There is no chance.
Neither one of you like that question. They're both speechless.
I do. There is no chance that you could have a woman candidate pull off anything like what they are doing, and I think that's an important distinction to make. The idea that like Elizabeth Warren could somehow sit there and say, "Well, you become a tenured Harvard professor, you can get rich too," she would be rightly vilified for being completely tone deaf. So I do want to take this moment to say, as we have all of these women running, trying to imagine the defensiveness coming out of one of them when questioned about how they made their wealth is just completely inconceivable.
I have to say, I am truly shocked that a Clintonite would bring up gender. That's really shocking. But you know, great point. I have noticed that women are always being criticized for making money. You know, these female candidates, every day they have to confront that age-old stereotype of the rich, book-slinging lady. You know, a lot of women, they don't get into writing just because of the long history of women being torn down for their book money. What are you talking about? Sexism is a real thing. Women have to face it every day in 1,000 ways. But none of those ways are confronting making money from book sales. Hillary Clinton wrote plenty of books before she ran in 2016. Not once did I hear that she shouldn't be elected because of the money she made from hard choices.
Do the Trump voters, okay, so Bernie's been going through all these states that just barely voted for Trump, right? Pennsylvania, upper Midwest. Will some of the voters who voted for Trump, who had voted for Obama before, now look at Bernie Sanders and actually say, hey, I like this. I like this guy who's showing you can work and succeed. Yeah.
I like how she's spinning Bernie's potential appeal to Trump supporters like that would be a negative thing. The 2020 Democratic candidate will need to win Trump supporters over if the Dems want the White House.
I would say the average working class American says, I work hard. I want to keep more of my own money. I don't want you, because now that Bernie has it, he's coming for your money. They want to keep their money. Well, they want to be in the 1%. Who doesn't?
What is this guy talking about? Bernie's not coming for the money of poor workers. He wants to give them health care. And he wants rich people like himself to help ease the tax burden. Bernie is literally arguing to raise taxes on himself to help poor workers. And this guy says that Bernie is trying to take their money. It's almost the exact opposite of what Bernie wants.
I do. I certainly want to be. And I think most Americans say...
Which gets back to the rigged system and why people aren't.
No, not rigged.
But I will...
You work hard.
Well,
Bernie had a great idea, and he sold books.
But I will say this. Bernie Sanders, when push comes to shove, wants to keep his own money, too.
He certainly does.
Thank you both very much.
So that's how they end the segment. As you see, they leave off snickering about how Bernie really likes to hold on to his own money. Now, stick with me on this one, but I'd be remiss not to make the following point. When talking about Ilhan Omar, who was widely criticized as being anti-Semitic for tweeting, "It's all about the Benjamin's baby," in reference to a pro-Israel lobby, Erin Burnett covered the controversy. She pointed out that Trump was being hypocritical in calling on Omar to resign, as he himself has made anti-Semitic comments.
When racism comes up, and these, obviously, when it came to Charlottesville, the two, racism and anti-Semitism were intertwined. Let me just play a few examples of things the president has said. Scott, can he really attack Omar and say that as he did, right, that her apology is lame, she didn't mean it, and it's deep-seated in her heart when that's his track record?
But Burnett did not dispute the claims, being widely made, that Omar pointing out that lobbies use money to influence politicians is anti-Semitic. Instead, she characterized Omar's statements this way.
Do you think she is an anti-Semite? And I just want to understand, with Congresswoman Omar, it's clear what you're saying is that some of the things she has said have been clearly anti-Semitic, but you just don't want to level the charge anti-Semite at her. But look, if he's saying she should
took him off
resign
the
because
committee.
she
They
makes a
took him
tweet
off his
about
committees.
Benjamin, Scott, then how should he not resign for saying that Republican Jewish donors buy off their candidates?
I don't think
What
anyone
is the difference? You do not name her in the resolution by name, but it's clearly aimed at her, just like the resolution about Steve King and white supremacy was aimed at him, even though he wasn't mentioned. Congresswoman Omar has a pattern of similar comments. She would be well familiar with anti-Semitism, right? I mean, she would be. She's taken on the Gaza issue. She's not clueless about anti-Semitism. And the money trope. That's not an excuse that adds up for her.
ever said.
At what point do you say to her, Congresswoman Omar, look, you're not on this committee anymore. You strip her of your seat. Are you close to that or at that point?
So while Burnett accurately pointed to the president's hypocrisy, she also allowed her audience to believe that Omar was an anti-Semite, basically for colorfully arguing against money in politics. Then she ends an attack piece about Bernie Sanders saying,
Bernie Sanders, when push comes to shove, wants to keep his own money too.
I don't think that it's necessarily anti-Semitic to claim that the first serious Jewish presidential candidate is greedy just because he, didn't donate to the IRS? And I don't think that Erin Burnett is an anti-Semite. But if someone were to claim that her segment is anti-Semitic and call on her to resign, I'd be very tempted to feign a neutral stance, play some clips of Trump saying nasty things, and ask, is this as bad as it gets?
Very fine people on both sides.
We call her Pocahontas, and that's an insult to Pocahontas.
When Mexico sends its people, look at my African American over here, negotiating with Japan, negotiating with China, they say, we want deal.